Welcome to this webinar presented by the Human Leadership Academy. Today, we will be talking about how youth leadership is so important in the humanitarian field. For this conversation, we are actually very happy to have top-level panelists this morning, whom we thank very much for joining us, and especially for sharing with us their experiences and their lessons learned.
Welcome to this webinar presented by the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. We are delighted to be here with you today and speak with distinguished panelists this morning, with whom we will reflect on the important role of youth leadership in the humanitarian sector.
Before getting started, I'd like to tell you that during this hour and a half that we will be together, we have the interpretation service available. So I will let you all follow these instructions for a minute so that you can see how to configure your language of preference. Spanish is the default language for this meeting, and in that case, you wouldn't have to do much. But if you are, for whatever reason, listening to English and would prefer to listen in Spanish, you simply click on the world icon or on a three-dot menu saying more. There you will find the interpretation option where you can choose either English or Spanish. So we're going to give you just a minute for you to set that. And that way we can all understand each other better with no problem. Very well. Great. So I hope everyone was able to establish their language of preference. And now I would like to introduce myself. I am Ana Lucia Villagran. I am part of the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, and I am in Latin America at the regional center of the Academy, from where we have held several or have undertaken several projects working not only with other Save the Children offices, but also with important local partners, as well as with the youth that would like to enter the humanitarian field. And that's the reason why we are all here today, to talk a little bit more about that very important role that they play. I will remind you that this session is being recorded for everyone who was not able to connect right now. The dynamics of our conversation will be one where I will be asking questions to our panelists. They, in turn, will have a certain amount of time to answer. And then at the end of our session, we will have some time for Q&A, upwards of 10 minutes. I will ask that all participants please, throughout the presentations, that if you have any questions, to please use the Q&A feature and ask them there, because that's where we will focus when looking at any questions you have. And then at the end, we will also check the chat. But I would just like to make sure that all of your questions are contained in the Q&A feature. And also, if you'd like to ask a specific question to a specific panelist, please state that in your question. Very well. So let's go ahead and start with the session.
decía, ¿verdad? La caja de preguntas y respuestas.
And again,
Y
this is about the
vamos a dar
Q&A feature.
inicio ahora mismo.
And now we can
Aquí
go ahead
quiero
and
que
start.
vean ustedes cómo tenemos la agenda.
This is
Pues es la
today's agenda.
bienvenida, luego tenemos la
We have the
participación
opening
de Mercedes
words. Then we
García, que la
have
presentaré
a
en unos
presentation by
momentos,
Mercedes
líder
Garcia
del Centro
that I'll be
Regional
introducing in a moment. She's our
de
leader
Chile.
from
Y
the
luego
from the
tendremos
regional
a
center
Gesele, quien participó
at
en el
HLA.
programa de
And then we'll
jóvenes
have Gesele,
implicados
who
en
was in
2024.
the Humanitarian
Luego
Youth Program in
tendremos a
2024.
la
Then
participación de Mitchel Castro, quien representa
Michelle
la organización
Castro
Das
will
Perú. Y
speak,
Ana Paola
representing Das
Padillas,
Peru.
quien
And
cerrará
then Ana Paola
esta
Padilla
ronda de panel en
will speak
representación de la
and
Red
close
de
this panel,
Jóvenes para la Reducción
presenting
de
the
los Riesgos
Youth
de
Network
Desastres
to
para
reduce
la
the risk of
región de
disasters
América
for
Latina.
the Latin America
Luego
and Caribbean
pasaremos a
region.
la reflexión
Then we'll have
final.
Q&A and then some final
Y
thoughts.
muy bien, vamos a
Very
iniciar
well.
con
So let's
Mercedes como
begin
primer
with
punto,
Mercedes
¿verdad?
as the first
Mercedes
speaker.
García, muy
Mercedes
rápidamente
Garcia, just
te
very quickly,
presento y te dejo en
let me
tus
introduce
palabras.
you and then I'll give you the
Ella es
floor.
una ingeniera
She
civil
is
y
a
ambiental
civil and
con
environmental
posgrado en
engineer
desarrollo
with
comunitario
postgraduate studies in
del
local
área
development.
Fulbright, con
She's a
más de
Fulbright
20 años de
scholar with over
experiencia en
20
el
years of
ámbito
experience in
humanitario
the
y de
humanitarian and
desarrollo.
development fields.
Habiendo trabajado anteriormente
Having worked
con
previously
Plan Internacional, con
with
Oxfam
Plan
y el
International,
gobierno de El Salvador,
Oxfam, and the
Mercedes
El
ha
Salvadorian
liderado
government,
muchas
Mercedes
respuestas
has led
humanitarias en
many
Centroamérica,
humanitarian responses
ha
in Central
gestionado
America, and
programas
has
de reducción
managed
de desastres,
disaster mitigation
resiliencia,
programs,
acción
programs
humanitaria
on
y
resilience,
fortalecimiento de
humanitarian action,
capacidades. Y
and capacity building.
actualmente se
And currently,
desempeña como líder
she
regional
is the
de la
regional leader
Academia de Liderazgo
for
Humanitario
the
de
Humanitarian
Save the
Leadership
Children.
Academy at Save the
Así que
Children.
bienvenida,
So,
Mercedes.
welcome, Mercedes.
Por favor, cuéntanos
Please
un
tell
poco sobre
us
el programa de jóvenes
a little about
humanitarios
the
que impulsa la Academia de
Humanitarian
Liderazgo
Youth
Humanitario
Program
y
led by
por
the
qué
Humanitarian Leadership
son tan
Academy and
importantes
why
este tipo de iniciativas.
these kinds of initiatives are so
Adelante.
important. Please go ahead.
Bueno, muchas gracias Ana
Very
Lucía,
well.
¿verdad?
Thank
Y
you so
todos
much, Ana
quienes
Lucia, and everyone
participan
else
en esta jornada.
who is
En primer
in
lugar,
this session.
quería aprovechar para
First of all, I
presentarles esta
did want
extraordinaria
to present,
organización.
and maybe could you please move the next slide?
Sí, queríamos aprovechar también
So we
este
wanted
espacio para
to
quienes
take
no
advantage of
conocen
this
la
time
Academia de Liderazgo
to present
Humanitario,
the
¿verdad?
Humanitarian Leadership Academy for
Contarte
those of you who don't know it,
que en la
and
Academia
tell you
nosotros
that at the
buscamos conectar con actores locales y
we seek to connect with
ofrecer
local stakeholders and
talleres
offer
accesibles,
training that is
talleres
accessible
liderazgos y buscar un cambio
in support of
sistemático para
leadership
el sector.
to enable
En ese
systematic change
sentido,
to the
nosotros
sector.
tenemos una
And in that
visión, un
sense,
norte que es
we have an outlook
un mundo en el que todas las personas
for a
podemos
world where
enfrentar
everyone
crisis
can address
salvando vidas, ¿verdad?
crises
Y sabemos
by
que para
saving
hacer
lives. And we
esto
know that to
debemos
address
hacerlo desde el
crises,
nivel local.
we have to
Por
do
eso
so
es
at the
que la
local level.
misión y la
And
forma
that's
en la que
why the
nosotros
mission
buscamos
and the way
es
in which
poder
we
inspirar un
move
movimiento de
forward is
acción
by
humanitaria
inspiring a
y de
movement for
liderazgo desde
humanitarian
lo local,
action
¿verdad? Y
at the
los
local level,
valores que nos guían para esto son
together with our
compromiso,
guiding
responsabilidad,
values,
rendición de
which are a
cuentas
deep
y
responsibility,
soluciones que
accountability,
sean
and
colaborativas, pero
solutions
también
that
que
are
sean
collaborative
ambiciosas.
but also ambitious.
Siguiente, por favor.
Next.
Entonces, para esto
So to do
desde
this,
ya tenemos alrededor de 12, 15
we
años
have
de
up,
estar
we've
trabajando en el sector
been
humanitario
working in the
y
humanitarian
esto
field
nos
for
da
12
un
to 15
alcance
years,
global. Hemos
and that really
trabajado
gives us a global
en
reach.
todo el mundo,
We have
¿verdad?
worked throughout the world
Asimismo, a través de centros regionales
through
y
our regional
creado una
centers,
serie de
and we
programas
have
de
created a
amplia
series of
aceptación en
programs
el sector,
that have been
donde
widely accepted
tenemos
in
plataformas
the
como
sector.
la
We also have
plataforma de Kaya,
platforms such as
que
the
es muy
Kaya platform,
conocida, ¿verdad?
which
Y
is very well
trabajamos con
known, and
certificación
we
a
also
través de
work
Gachipaz y
with
estamos también
certifications through
redeterminando
Gachipaz,
lo que
and
es
we
el
are also
liderazgo y coaching
redefining
para el sector
leadership and
humanitario
coaching
como
for the
parte de nuestro
humanitarian
trabajo.
sector as
En
part
ese
of our work.
sentido, nuestras prioridades
In that sense,
estratégicas para
our
los próximos
strategic
años
priorities
hasta
for the coming years
2027
to 2027
en primer lugar,
are, first of
apoyar
all,
un liderazgo
to
humanitario
support
local,
local
¿verdad? Esto
humanitarian leadership,
significa
which means
empoderar a los diversos actores,
empowering
¿verdad? O
the various
apoyar ese
stakeholders
empoderamiento.
or
También
supporting
impulsar
that empowerment,
acciones colectivas
as well as boosting collective action, where we will focus our efforts much more on working with networks, working with platforms, and creating spaces where several actors can dialogue. And lastly, our last strategy is to amplify the experience. This is also about disseminating the experiences and all of the knowledge locally into several territories and countries. And we leverage this platform in a way so that it is democratic. Next, please. In our line of leadership, which is the first line under our strategy, we found the need to focus on a program for the youth. And well, that is how this initial pilot program was created, which is the program for humanitarian youth, with a global objective to develop a world network of humanitarian and youth leaders who engage actively in decision making and who inform public policy and lead the humanitarian response in a localized manner while strengthening local organizations. So that is the goal, the overall goal of the program. And this initial pilot program that we conducted in late 2024 and early 2025 focused on 3 territories. One pilot was conducted in Poland in response to Ukraine, and also in response to the earthquake in Turkey. And in our case, our pilot program was in Peru. Next, please. So why Peru? Peru is a country that we had been working in with our capacity building efforts. And we did see that it's a country with already multiple phenomenon, that is natural phenomenon, social, political, and economic phenomenon that are quite complex, together with a humanitarian context that has been developed to address the Venezuelan migrant issue, together with disasters in diverse situations, with many vulnerabilities and needs. And conversely, something interesting about Peru is that we have a youth population which is quite strong, together with an unemployment rate that is also quite high in the region. So we did feel that in this context, the program could contribute something to the country. Next. So with that, we created, or rather we started the pilot in Peru, and we started to create this program where the goal was to have an increase in youth engagement, people from 18 to 30 years of age, in humanitarian action to help them to become humanitarian leaders, specialized leaders, by strengthening their capacity and resilience as local actors to respond at the community level. And for that, we worked with our natural partner, which is Save the Children. The Academy is within Save the Children, and we worked with the Save the Children office in country to determine, together with local organizations with whom we had already worked, the way forward. And we already had a relationship with these organizations. So the work with Save the Children was done with 4 organizations: DAS, Pro Purus, Acción de los Niños, and Descocentro. We worked in several areas in Lima, Chiclayo, Huancayo, and the Peruvian Amazon. So what we did was define the actual needs of the organizations at the time, including any gaps they might have in their current programs. And we also looked at the matter of personnel. So we started to engage each organization and each specific program to find the various professionals needed to come into the program. And that is how we were able to engage professionals in psychology and social work, and nursing, communications, anthropology, and international relations. A very diverse group, professionally speaking, and also in territories. Next. So we began a program with four major components. The first component is training. The youth had approximately 20 hours of online courses using the Kaya platform under the Academy. We had been already working on these modules in Latin America, and we made sure that the material was available in Spanish so that the youth could access it. And we created a syllabus based on their needs. And we also had 18 hours of synchronous sessions where we were able to bring in specialists to engage in weekly sessions with the youth to dive deeper into and consolidate knowledge. The second component was experiential knowledge. What does this mean? It means that the youth from the organizations with whom we worked had 12 weeks of work at the organization. This was field and office work. It was paid work where they were able to come in as part of the staff of the organizations. And under this component, they were able to conduct training or receive training and then take the knowledge to the organization. The third component was coaching and a mentorship program. This was more of a one-on-one engagement where we had the support of mentors who were experts in the field of humanitarian work. And well, they provided this personalized mentorship. And we had 4 mentors working with the youth in various sessions to discuss the various topics around their syllabus, but also to address any questions as far as their career performance and other aspects. So this was a key component to have this more personalized approach. And then the last component was well-being and resilience, where we were also able to see how certain techniques were created, led by the youth to ensure their well-being as humanitarian workers, considering that this is a very relevant component so that the humanitarian work is sustainable throughout their careers and so that they do not burn out very quickly, but instead so they know how to manage stress and work in dynamic situations. Lastly, as a cross-cutting approach, we developed a strong components for monitoring and lessons. Since this was a pilot, we also wanted to document all of the lessons learned that we could under the program. So, what did we achieve? First of all, despite this initiative being short, it was only 3 months, we did see an impact. First, we saw an impact at the personal level in the youth who participated. And later on, we'll see the testimonial from someone who was impacted. But this approach, this person-centric approach also made it so that people could grow in knowledge and skills and experience in humanitarian aspects. And we believe that this will make them become agents of change in their territories and in their future work. We also had an impact at the organizational level. Why? Because since the youth were in the actual local organizations in the field, that also made it so that they obtained a certain capacity. And we'll be hearing about their experiences as well later on. So we're calling this a pre-positioned capacity because certain organizations had to address humanitarian situations at the time of training, and the youth actually played a leadership role in these situations, given that many organizations did not have the humanitarian specialization, and they did recognize that it was something that they had to improve. So that helped them to become stronger, and in fact, several of the organizations after this continued to see how they might grow their humanitarian section in their organizations. Another impact was on the humanitarian sector, given that, again, this youth was able to not only grow personally, but they were also able to contribute via their work to the programs under each organization. And also, many of them are now contributing back to their communities with this new knowledge and the growth that they had. As far as lessons, we did see good practices. And first of all, one important thing was to have designed something that was not completely new, but instead that was done based on programs and projects that were already underway in the organizations, together with their programs as interns. It was important to coordinate between the various stakeholders, but actually one lesson learned specifically here is that we had to include the academic sector more. Given our time, we were not able to do this in a very strong way, but we hopefully in the next instance we can do so. Also, the fact that the work was compensated, that was a competitive advantage for the youth, but also made the youth commit more. And that made it so the barriers to participation were removed. All of the pillars under the program were considered to be relevant by all the participants. And one thing they did point out is that the time was very short. And all the initiatives, including Poland and Turkey, with more resources, well, in the case of Poland and Turkey, their pilot programs were about 5 or 6 months, but we had to limit ourselves to 3 months, unfortunately, but hopefully we can do something longer in future opportunities. Another important thing to mention is that since we work using online platforms, the way to address the difficulties in connectivity in rural areas was also important, especially for the youth. We also looked at how to improve networking and the connections between the interns. So that would be it for me, Ana Lucia, and well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mercedes. It's truly exciting to learn about the impact that these kinds of initiatives have had in the humanitarian field. And as Mercedes also hinted, we have Gesele Diaz, who was one of the participants under the program, under the pilot program for humanitarian youth in 2024-2025. And I'll go ahead and introduce her so that we can hear about her experience. Gesele is a high school graduate, or rather has a bachelor's degree in social work with a special interest in sustainable development to address the causes of vulnerability in communities. She did her internship in Acción por los Niños, supporting the team in their operations, in promotion, and in defending the program. She is a graduate of Universidad Nacional Mayor of San Marcos. So please, Gesele, welcome and tell us, how did you get involved in the program and what kinds of jobs did you do? And also, we'd like for you to tell us about how this initiative has impacted or will impact your professional career into the future. Hello, good morning, everyone. I am Gesele, and first I'd like to thank you for this time to share our experiences under the Humanitarian Youth Program. Now, in response to your question, Mercedes mentioned some of this, but again, this was through an agreement between Acción por los Niños, where I was doing my internship. And the experience has been very gratifying in terms of, this was my first entry into the humanitarian field. When my boss told me about this, my boss Emira, when she said that you will not only be supporting us in this regular work, but you will also be trained in humanitarian aspects, to me that was quite gratifying because it's difficult to find spaces where you can receive training, especially in this field. Oftentimes, we see it as something so remote, or let's say something that we can never get to or receive training on. And that's why through this program, I've been able to learn about several concepts. I've also been able to develop my skills throughout the training, which indeed was short but very gratifying, as far as seeing how we at the program could have spaces to come together every week and to talk about the various issues around the program itself, and also working on those issues together and seeing them in the field in a practical sense, so not only theoretical. The organization that I'm in does not necessarily respond to humanitarian issues, but through this program, we were able to, as an organization, become more involved and be more aware about the various situations, because like Mercedes said, in the Peruvian context, we have natural phenomena, we have a political and economic issue and various mobilizations. And in the area where we intervene, which is southern Lima, these areas are highly vulnerable to many natural disasters, be it earthquakes or displacements, because they live in high-risk areas. So being able to work with them and engage with the youth and the teens was excellent. And amongst the jobs that I had under the program, we were able to take what was learned and put it into practice. That is, we were able to connect with several organizations and institutions working in the field and talk about the plan and meet and see if we could respond to the various issues that arise in the area, or even establish certain baselines and plans. For 2025, we were able to include many things into the plan, many things that may arise. So if there's an earthquake or any other disaster, there's never a warning for that, but at least we are now more prepared for these kinds of issues. And that way our response cannot be a rushed response, but instead it could be a response that actually benefits the children and youth. Also, the ability to train and empower the youth so that they also have a response to the situation was key. We, as an organization, see that the youth are subject to rights. So they themselves have an opinion and can respond to situations and take action. So I had been trained under the program, and I was able to see how people would come forward and say, look, this is the situation for children here. And then being able to talk about that with the actual youth and children was important because oftentimes as adults, we think that we are the only ones that can have an answer or response with our voices. But they can also say, look, we as youth and children have this view, and we can work together with you and provide tools. So in my case, being able to share the experiences and engaging with them in training is also very important. Also, the matter of coordination. The coordination that we established under the program meant that we would not only talk about the response to an emergency situation, but we were also trained in soft skills where we could, as individuals, provide solutions or even contribute something. That made that made it so that I was able to actually train better because I realized now that I did have shortcomings in these topics, and now I was able to address them and improve my manner of expression and the way of reaching out in a better way. In the PowerPoint, you can see that we engaged in several different fields. And those other organizations and fields really contributed back to us. This made me realize that we have to always keep in mind the rights and the defense of children and youth. That was how I got involved in a program then. And as far as how this has impacted, or let's say, how will this affect me in the future as a professional? It's been very gratifying, all of this, because, like I mentioned, I didn't have any prior experience in the humanitarian field, not even in training. I mean, I had just barely read things online and things that people share or saw what other countries were doing, but I didn't see it so much as what could I do to get involved. So being able to have been trained and to understand, because it's also very difficult to be in a certain space and to just receive information because you know certain jobs require that you have a certain prior experience or prior knowledge, and that can be very difficult. So having been able to have trained on these matters, that provides me with better tools and has allowed me to improve my presentation skills. And as far as how to use these skills in my organization, well, as I mentioned previously, my organization does not work directly in the humanitarian response, but as of now, given my experience under the program and with the training and everything else, we are now creating a plan to respond to these kinds of situations. And in that planning, I can leverage everything I've learned about humanitarian aspects and also in consideration of our context, our territory when it comes to addressing crises, together with protection that is for that, so that the children and youth can also receive protection. On all those things, we are not including them in the plan. And I am now also better connected with mentors, namely Ana Mercedes and Lucia, and I can now reach out to them when looking at planning and how to replicate certain things in our context. So all of this has been very interesting, and especially interesting when initially you feel as though you didn't know anything. You were like a newly hatched chick, just learning things, and now you have the knowledge, and now you have colleagues that you can leverage and improve your networks with and engage in new experiences where you can actually contribute to your organization. All these things are very gratifying, and not just in seeing what action can be taken, but also in seeing how we can become agents of change and how we can build our capacity and safeguard human dignity and have a multidimensional approach to things. All of this allows us to engage in spaces such as this, specifically under this program, that continues to see how we're doing, tracking our progress. We've been able to continue in this whole process, like I mentioned. So what was not there before is there now, and we can now involve other stakeholders so that it not only remains in our organization, but can also be disseminated and leveraged with others in response to a certain situation. Excellent, Gesele. It is truly a pleasure to hear you say these words and talk about your experiences under the program and how your participation has really bolstered what you're doing in your organization. And just like you said, it's also about this calling that you receive to become agents of change. I am very sure that you have a very prosperous career ahead of you. So we thank you, Gesele, for having come in to share your experiences with us. Now, and I'll just remind you, if you have any questions, you can write them in using the Q&A feature at the bottoms of your screen. And if you'd like to direct your question specifically to someone, please state that in your question so we know later on who should answer your questions. Now, if I may address Mitchel Castro, who is joining us today in representation of the DAS Peru local organization. This organization was one of the participating organizations in the Humanitarian Youth Initiative. Mitchel has over 20 years of experience in the public and private sectors in human development and humanitarian aid, with a special focus on the Amazon and indigenous peoples. He is a communicator, a social communicator by profession, and has a master's in social management, and is currently the social manager for environmental and social development at DAS. The DAS Peru organization is a local organization committed to promoting and defending human rights, comprehensively developing or comprehensive development, inclusive and sustainable, biodiversity conservation, humanitarian assistance, and the fight against global change. DAS works in high biodiversity areas, encouraging and implementing processes and results that impact at the local level, regional levels, and national levels for the well-being and the improvement of the quality of life for the communities they serve. So welcome, Mitchel. Thank you so much for being with us today. I understand that your organization had 2 humanitarian youth in this process. So please tell us how you inserted this initiative into your operations, and also what impact do you think there was under this initiative in your organization? Were there any unexpected achievements? Please tell us what the experience was like. Welcome, Mitchel. Thank you so much, Ana Lucia, and good morning, everyone. I send you the warmest of greetings from behalf of the entire team at DAS Peru. And I thank the Academy also for allowing us to engage in this space and to share with you our experiences, which have been actually very significant and valuable to our organization. So let's get started. Next, please. Next, since Ana Lucia already had a great introduction about us at DES, I won't repeat that part. But if we could go back to that previous slide, because I did want to give you a little bit of context, because I understand that not everyone is from Peru. We work focusing on the Peruvian Amazon region. And as far as emergencies, the Peruvian Amazon has emergencies associated with flooding and forest fires, most of all. And in this Amazon region, there are original indigenous peoples. And these indigenous peoples, most of which who depend on the river and the forests, when these kinds of emergencies come up, they suffer directly and endanger their lives and manner of living. So any fire or any flood is usually very serious as far as the effects on them. With this context, and thanks to the Academy, we were able to undertake this program of professional internships for humanitarian youth. Next, please. So, under the program, we have the protagonists. And here we are very thankful to the Academy because they were able to give us the freedom to choose the professionals. We had two professionals, Maria Luisa Nieto, who is a nurse, and also Jordi Saldaña, who is a psychologist. And one important lesson was found here because we do intervene in humanitarian aspects. And the main principle at DAS is that we work for and by the people. So we establish emotional relationships with the beneficiaries. And that's why we needed, in the case of humanitarian aid, that these interventions be reinforced from the health standpoint and also from the psychological standpoints to provide support in health, addressing things such as respiratory illnesses and others, together with the emotional aspects, because our main focus of care focuses on youth and teens and adolescents. So having these people with us allowed us to reinforce our interventions. And something that's been quite valuable throughout this time has been this complementary aspects between the theory and the practice. The theory is via the academy and training, and then the practical, because in the case of the people who joined us, they were able to directly intervene in humanitarian aid efforts. Hence this slide. They intervened in two main geographical regions. They were in the Ucayali region to map information to create a needs assessment with regard to forest fires. And they were also in the San Martin region, where they were able to aid in distributing humanitarian kits. And this was important to them because they expanded their view. Because in San Martin, they engaged in the high Amazon areas, and in Ucayali, it was the low Amazon, the Amazon plains. So geographically, these are very different regions with different needs and with different populations, and which also enhanced their view as humanitarian youth. In turn, they really helped directly in working with the indigenous peoples, with indigenous patients in Ucayali. They also worked directly in providing education sessions around nutrition and healthy living in the indigenous peoples in the city of Pucallpa on the border region. And we were also able to have major contributions from them in creating documentation for addressing the indigenous population, because we do acknowledge that the youth perspective and their experience and their new contexts, the context that they provide to the organization, enrich us. And today, we now have documentation that really helps us in our interventions. And that is all because of their participation. Next, please. Now, as far as what we've been able to do as an organization, what achievements? As an institution, we believe that Yorli and Maria Luisa's participation allowed us to become enriched and we were able to strengthen our humanitarian efforts given their experience because they directly supplemented action and enriched action. And also, thanks to the support, we were able to, as an organization, meet our deadlines with a high degree of efficiency because they are very responsible people. Jorli, in psychology, really contributed in the emotional support in the humanitarian response. And with Maria Luisa, we had advice and orientation given around matters of health. And that truly changed our way of engaging with these populations. Soon, we will be incorporating, and Maria Luisa, we will be incorporating Maria Luisa as part of our staff, and we continue to engage with Jorli to continue to have these joint efforts underway. We believe that by having these professionals with us, it has allowed for DAS to increase its knowledge in a positive way with regard to other organizations, other beneficiaries. That is, again, their responsibility level is quite high, their commitment is quite high, and they've been supplementing everything they've learned and have taken that to the field. So we truly believe that the opportunity that the Academy gave us enriched us, helped us grow as an institution, and we also believe it has helped in our professional and personal growth, both in us and them. That's why I included them in this presentation, because I believe the most important thing is to hear their voices. And they recorded a few videos that we'd like to share with you. And I always close with this last slide. Next, please. By thanking everyone for this space. And that's them. This is us. This is what our work looks like. That is our team. And we work for the children. And we believe that these interventions help to expand opportunities in the youth. And for that, we thank the Academy very much. We thank all of you as well. And if maybe you can play the videos, that would be great. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Mitchell. I will be sharing a video. Well, I only received one of the videos from Jordi, so that's the video I'll be playing now. Give me 1 second. Hello. I am Jordi Saldan, a psychologist. I did my internship over 3 months at the DAS Peru NGO together with Save the Children. And the experience I gained over these 3 months has been wonderful. I've discovered community psychology in terms of aid to the communities that have been affected by forest fires that actually took place in our city last year. I've discovered the great potential and the wonderful things that come from helping others, especially those in rural regions. I feel very happy to have been part of this experience because I've been able to learn a little bit more about my career. And it has opened up more opportunities for me where today I can now address the communities better. So I am very thankful, and I recommend that you also form part of this because the lessons you take away are the lessons of empathy, of love, and teamwork. So thank you very much. Greetings, everyone. And again, I'm Jordi Saldaña, psychologist at your service for anything you need. Take care. Thank you so much. Thanks to Jordi, who leaves us this beautiful message. And again, thanks to Mitchell also for his presentation, who talked to us about the importance of including youth professionals, young professionals, in humanitarian work, and telling us about how they can support or provide support. Because like Gesele said previously, it's not always easy to find a way into this field. and you sometimes feel as though you know nothing, but in practice, organizations also feel this, and they also really feel the support that you bring to organizations based on their knowledge. So thank you so much once again, Mitchell. And now, if I may, I'd like to invite Ana Paula Padil to speak, who is joining us in representation of the Youth Network for Reducing Disaster Risk in the Latin American region and the Caribbean regions. Ana Paula is a civil engineer from Honduras with three years of experience in disaster risk management. She has a master's in risk management and planning under Alicante University, and she is currently coordinating the youth network to reduce the risk of disasters in Central America. Her work focuses on adaptation to climate change and reducing the risk of disasters in Honduras. Welcome, Ana, and thank you for joining us in this space. I'd like to ask you, why do you think it's important to include the youth in a humanitarian response? And if I may ask, that may place your presentation so you can take the floor. And again, the question is, why is it important to include the youth in a humanitarian response? And also, how can organizations and the humanitarian system in general support the youth? Welcome, Ana. Thank you, Ana, and thanks to all of the participants. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this space and for being able to share our standpoint from the youth network to reduce the risk of disasters. And in response to your question, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the network actually seeks out. Next, please. Thank you. The main goal of the network is to increase, or rather integrate, the youth in Latin America and the Caribbean to build capacity, cooperate mutually, and engage in advocacy with a gender approach and intersectional approach. On this, I'd like to share with you that 1 in 4 disasters happen in Latin America. We are a region that is highly vulnerable to all these impacts, as we are exposed to many natural phenomena that ultimately cause emergencies. And in this region, humanitarian action is very intense work. Our specific goals under the network are to foster community and youth engagement, specifically on the risk of disasters, but also with this approach on how humanitarian aid can get involved, and also to reduce vulnerabilities and provide climate resilience or boost climate resilience, given that these phenomena really impact our regions. We also strengthen technical knowledge and community knowledge about the risk of disasters to, again, increase resilience, reduce vulnerability. And through this training, through this technical community knowledge, as previous panelists have mentioned, are really seen in the pilot program that we had in Peru and in other parts of the world. Another one of the goals is to create a safe space open for dialogue and collaboration between the youth to exchange experiences and exchange approaches under the network in humanitarian efforts that can be worked on together. Next, please. Also, to answer your question, in addition to the fact that youth must be included, this is also a way of leveraging humanitarian response, since we are 20% of the population in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we are a generation that has undergone several crises, the climate, health, and other crises, which makes us more resilient, more aware. We are also more creative and aware of the risks that we're exposed to. And as the youth network states, we are not only vulnerable, but we're also immersed in this population that is exposed to the disasters and the effects of climate change. We are also an active force that can propose, can act, and transform our regions. And speaking specifically of the network, since we're under several frameworks, in our case, we're in this Sendai framework that promotes this multi-generational, multi-sector approach to reduce the risks of disasters. There, we say that humanitarian aid must include the youth so that the effort is full and not incomplete. Next, please. And why do I say this? I say it because under the network, we've identified 4 fields of action that these systems can contribute to. That is to contribute to the youth. And the first is innovation. As we heard previously, the youth have innovative ideas, have ways of supplementing the efforts already underway in various organizations. And it's because we have that outlook, let's say, given our context, given the way that we were brought up, we can provide a different approach. And then together with our technology and science skills, all of this is an opportunity for the youth to create initiatives aligned with the skills that we've been brought up with. Another important aspect that we engage in is supporting capacity building. Under the youth program, we strengthen the youth and build their capacity. And although it's true that many professionals maybe do not always have the same opportunities or not the same skills, we are always seeking to develop our skills further. And this was a way in which we were able to grow in a local manner. Another thing that the youth contributes is inclusion and participation. That the youth be included in decision-making both internationally and domestically. The network seeks to have youth engagement always at the local level and escalate that into the regional and subsequently into all the other platforms worldwide. And as one last line of action under the network, we have investments, being able to mobilize funds in different sectors, given that the network is one example showing that online collaborative work can have concrete impacts. And one last slide. I leave you with this thought. Based on the Youth Declaration for the Reduction of the Risk of Disasters, which was done in the 8th platform, stating that the youth are not only the future, but we are also the present, and we are ready to be a part of the solution through these spaces and through these opportunities to engage in these experiences, such as the Humanitarian Leadership Program. And again, it's always about addressing the crises locally and leading the humanitarian effort locally, and of course, building the skills behind that. We have the potential for these opportunities and to create these initiatives and use that approach which is sometimes lacking, the innovative approach lacking in these organizations and programs. So thank you very much, Ana, and everyone else for your contributions. Thank you. Thank you, Ana, and I think these thoughts that you're leaving us with are very important, very valuable, because it's almost a cliche now to say that the youth are the future, but they are also the present and are also ready to be part of the solutions. Very important thought for everyone here. And speaking of that, today here with us. So we thank you very much for your time and also being aware of the time we have left. I will read some of the questions from the audience that were sent in. If you still have not sent in your questions, please do so now. And first, I will look at the questions under Q&A, and then we'll see if there's anything else left in it. So please give me 1 second. We have a question saying, I would like to know, actually, let me see if it's for anyone in particular. I think this is for the academy. It says, I would like to know if you have any plans for a training program for local leaders, and specifically to receive grants. I think local leaders in their own communities need this kind of training on the easy access to grants, especially during emergency situations, so that they can have effective communications and effective support for the communities. I think this is very important for a better impact by programs. So maybe Mercedes, if you'd like to answer. Yes, for now, I'm not aware if the Academy itself has any specific programs in this field, but what we can say now is that we have platforms online for training. And I would also mention that on our social networks, we are constantly posting any calls, let's say, for training or any calls for specific programs. I totally agree in that it is important to work with community leadership locally. And in fact, that's what we want to promote as the Academy. The capacity has to be in place in the territories. We acknowledge that, and what we also recommend is that you approach local organizations in the fields you're in to maybe insert yourselves and see what's available. And again, from the Academy's standpoint, on social networks, we are constantly posting all these possibilities. Thank you very much, Mercedes. We also have a question from Mohammed, who says, what skills are the most valuable, or what skills are most valued by the youth in humanitarian leadership? Maybe Ana can help us with this question. So what are some of the skills? What are some of the skills that are most valued by the youth for humanitarian leadership? Thank you, Ana. Well, I would think it's about being proactive. It's about that is, it's having having the initiative is a very valuable skill. And also being a self-learner is important. And I also think that there's also the matter of the desire to help communities and wanting to do something for them is important. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ana. And then we also have a question from Natman Johnson, who says, well, my name is Natman Johnson from Nigeria. He is a specialist in environmental health and community health. He has certifications, many certifications in education and communications under emergencies and WASH. And he says, or he'd like to know how he could grow his career in humanitarian response, and also how could he form part of any in-person physical conference being held by the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. So Mercedes, maybe you could also help us with this answer? Yes. I think that, just like Ana said, we have to start to seek out the opportunities. There are many, many online training courses available, which are quite useful to expand our knowledge. But also in the territories, we should approach local organizations to insert ourselves there. There are also initiatives such as the Latin American Network here, the Latin American Youth Network, where you can also engage. And maybe, Ana, afterwards, we maybe could share some of the things we're doing here with the youth in, in a response to emergencies and how they can insert themselves, together with initiatives in other continents to see how you can maybe engage in these activities. As for conferences, in-person conferences, again, we are constantly posting on our networks when these opportunities arise. And we are also trying to strengthen our online platform so we can reach out to more people. Because doing a physical conference might be very expensive, and we know that the sector currently is in a crisis. And while technology is also advancing very much every day, so we'd like to maybe leverage technology, and our strategy will also then be about strengthening our technology to reach out to more people in a quicker manner, in more languages, and to start to close those gaps. Thank you very much, Mercedes. And with regard to your answer, we have a question here by Manuel asking, what platforms specifically are you talking about? Where could you find them? How can you find them? Yes, and in the comments, actually in our chat, our communications person wrote in some links. I know Kaya Connect has been mentioned in the case of the Academy, and also on our social networks, we have LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, I forget where else, but on our networks, we have a very dynamic presence where we are constantly posting, Ana, maybe you could also tell us a little bit about how to approach the youth network platform. I think it was in a presentation, but yes, I can share the link in the group here for you to all read a little bit more about the network supported by the UNDRR, which is the United Nations Office for the to reduce the risk of disasters. And our Instagram link, I'll also put that in the chat for you to look at it. That's where we also post any updates to register and be a part of the network. Thank you, Ana. So you'll find that information in the chat, which I think is very important because, as Mercedes well said, this global network has Ana participating and representing the Latin American network, but surely there are similar networks in other continents. We also have a question here that I might ask Gesele to answer. Maybe you can answer this question. Gulam Mustafa is asking, what are some of the challenges faced by youth leaders when entering the humanitarian field? And maybe after Gesele, Mitchell could also answer the question. Yes, as far as the initial challenges, one challenge initially is actually getting in, because organizations do require certain levels of experience, and maybe as youth you are still in training, so maybe more spaces should be enabled where youth professionals can become involved to provide that opportunity. And secondly, managing our emotions, because these situations ultimately, I mean, seeing things in person is sometimes difficult to deal with. Hence, the support network and the organization to address the emotions, because ultimately we are human beings, and any situation we experience can also make us vulnerable. Those, I would say, would be the two main challenges that you might face when coming into this field. Thank you very much, Gesele. And maybe from the organizational standpoint, Mitchell, what do you think are the main challenges faced by youth leaders in this field? What I think is that the most important thing for youth is to understand that they are agents of change. That is, you're not the future, you're the now. Now is the time to act. And acting entails certain skills that you have to strengthen. For example, in the case of choosing our professionals, we choose professionals that know the field. And knowing the field is key. It's key because you have to learn, you have to know about the social context, the cultural context, and know how to navigate it. That is key for the youth to engage. Another key point to me is the willingness to continuously learn and innovate and work as a team. These skills really add to an intervention because, again, these are quick interventions, which means that they have to have a very flexible view when it comes time to mobilize and interact and dialogue with their peers and organizations and local leaders, because the contact is actually done through them. And at that level, another thing that has to be strengthened is their emotional skills, because these are difficult contexts. That is, visiting communities that have been affected by a fire and seeing the children there, seeing communities affected by flooding, and seeing the level of suffering that they might face, and while in turn being respectful and empathetic and contributing to those communities is all key. So I think those emotional skills are something we should also work on. Lastly, one thing that we believe to be very valuable to us is that all youth have something to contribute. That's really the core of it all. We saw this yesterday with Ana. When it comes to technology and using new ways of looking at reality and finding practical and quick solutions, all of that is very valuable and very transformative. So I think oftentimes you just have to believe in yourself, and not just believe in yourself, but I should believe you're an agent of change, and believe that your contributions will be key and valuable. And that opens doors. We've seen this with our young professionals. They actually become indispensable. We've seen how these people actually become key to us. So the initiatives are there and you have to take them. And what better field than the humanitarian field to help others? We work for and by people. That's what I would say. That is our organization. That's how we see things. Another key point, again, around capacity building is that you have to take advantage of the opportunities. And the Academy is a huge opportunity for everyone. That is being able to access information and mentorships online or in person. It's about being there. That's what I would say.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Mitchell. And yes, I think it's really important what you've just said. First, believing that you have the skills is important. Sometimes we don't always see that. Sometimes we're somewhat fearful that we're working with people with 20, 30 years of experience, and how might I contribute to that kind of knowledge, and what can I put on the table that is important. I would like to read another question from Jahanara that says that in southern Bangladesh, in the southern part of the country, there are issues more around food or lack of food, I imagine, cyclones, river erosion. All of this as part of climate change, that is food security. So she's asking, how might we develop youth leadership in situations that are already emergency situations, and how can we have the opportunity to develop our youth? So, which of you would like to maybe answer that question?
Bueno, yo creo que, digamos, en
I
primer
think
lugar,
that,
¿verdad? Es
first of all,
importante que mapear cuáles son las
it's important to
oportunidades
map
que existen en los
the
territorios,
opportunities
¿verdad?
that we have in the territories.
Acercarse con, como les decía, con las organizaciones
Like I mentioned
locales,
previously, approach local organizations and
academia
also
local, gobiernos
approach
locales,
local academia,
para
local government
ver qué oportunidades,
to
¿verdad?
see
En
what
el
kinds
caso de
of
Bangladesh,
opportunities there may be. In the case of
hay
Bangladesh,
también organizaciones internacionales
there
que
are
están
international organizations
desarrollando
there
programas, ¿verdad?
that are
Save the
conducting
Children
programs.
desarrolla
I know that Save the
programas
Children
enfocados en la
has
niñez, en la
programs
juventud,
focusing on the youth in the field.
¿verdad? Entonces es buscar
So it's
territorialmente
really
cuáles son
about
estos posibles programas,
seeking
¿verdad?
out
Acercarnos
potential
en
programs
las
locally
redes
and
también, las
approaching
redes
them.
sociales.
Today,
La
social
virtualidad nos
networks
ayuda mucho a
and
conocer
anything online really
qué
helps
está
us to learn
pasando
about what's
y ir
happening out there
buscando cómo acercarnos, ¿verdad?
and finding the way to
También,
approach
¿verdad? Como les
the various
decía, en
organizations.
nuestra plataforma
And just
podemos
like
encontrar una
I
diversidad de
mentioned,
programas.
you can find many programs on our
También
platform.
tenemos la plataforma de respuestas a
We
situaciones.
also have
No sé si también si la colega
a situation
de
response platform.
comunicaciones me puede
Maybe
apoyar a
our
poner
colleague from
cómo
communications
se
could
llama
help us
la página
by
web.
writing
Entonces ahí
in
tenemos
the
diseñados
response
programas
website, where we
específicos
also have
para
programs
respuestas
specific to
digamos, como de este tipo.
responding to
Entonces,
emergency
ahí pueden ver
situations.
más también los
There, you
recursos
will
más
also
capacitados
see
que podemos
what
ofrecer.
resources we offer in a more
Muchas
summarized way.
gracias, Mercedes.
Thank you very much, Mercedes.
Definitivamente, pues, una conversación
Undoubtedly,
muy interesante y sobre
this
todo
conversation is really interesting,
tenemos
especially
preguntas y
since we have
participantes de
questions
todas
and
partes del
participants
mundo
from
y todos
all over
unidos
the world,
con
all
este
coming
mismo
together
interés, ¿verdad? De
under
saber
this common interest
cómo
of
podemos
learning about
involucrar
how we can get
también el
involved
liderazgo juvenil y por qué es importante,
and
sobre
in
todo,
youth leadership, and why
involucrar
it's so important,
el
especially
liderazgo
to become
juvenil
involved
en
in youth
el
leadership
sector y la respuesta
in the field
humanitaria.
and in humanitarian responses.
Les agradecemos a todos
We
por
thank
su
everyone
participación y por
for your
esta participación
participation
activa, por
today,
las preguntas.
for your
Y
active
quisiera
participation, for your
pedirle
questions.
también a
And I would
Mercedes
also like to
si nos
ask
puede ayudar con
Mercedes
una
to please
última
maybe
reflexión
provide
sobre
some
lo que
final
hemos estado
thoughts
aquí compartiendo
about
en
what
esta
we've
casi hora
shared
y
today
media
in this
para
almost
pues
hour and a half
finalizar este encuentro, este webinar.
to then close out this webinar.
Okay. Gracias, Ana. Bueno, sí
Okay,
queríamos
thank you, Ana. And
para
yes,
cerrar y creo que
we
la
did want to
participación que hemos
close now, and
tenido
I think
ahorita en
the
este 5
participation
preguntas y
we've seen
respuestas ha sido
via your questions
muy rica,
have
¿verdad?
been very enriching.
Sobre lo que habíamos planeado. Entonces,
as we had planned. So we heard testimonials from Gesele and Ana as representatives of the youth. And we also heard about Jordi's experience, although not in person, showing how this youth is committed to their respective fields and committed also to coordination. Mitchell also told us about how, as an organization that made the decision to trust in the new generation and how they were enriched for it. We always say that the youth is the future. Anna said this as well. And under the youth program, we've seen that the youth is also in the present, a transformative present, who shows us a future of new possibilities when addressing crises. There are people here from all over the world, which are really loved. That is, this isn't just Latin American youth, but people from elsewhere. And we see that crises actually bring us together. We have recurrent crises, we have social fragmentation, we have climate emergencies, and the youth can give us new eyes, a new view, like Mitchell said. They give us a fresh view with commitment to their territories, with also empathy for the communities. So the youth has the capacity to innovate, to engage in technology, and the RTD network has prioritized these issues in its field. And well, I think the creation of networks is something key for the future. And it's also important to decentralize power and to democratize knowledge, which is key to the academy, as well as fostering authentic engagement by the youth. One interesting point, well, let me mention a few interesting points that came up in our evaluation, in our assessment. One was that 100% of youth that participated stated after the program that they felt prepared now to respond to a humanitarian crisis, and also expressed their wish to continue in the field, which confirms that with these tools, the youth can effectively lead and facilitate decision making in times of crisis, as Gesele mentioned, showing how these tools help them to make right decisions. Another important thing that has come up in the comments too is around how to break down youth engagement barriers, which is something that we address in terms of diversity and inclusion in the program. We have to make sure that we do not run the risk of discriminating the youth. And one discriminatory thing that we've seen in the field is that we expect the youth to work for free. In our survey, 63% of the youth participated in the program said that they would not have been able to participate if they had not been offered compensation for participating. So this tells us that we have to transform that paradigm that we have, that the youth are, let's say, only volunteer work and yes, that they have a lot of energy, but compensation can be provided. And we've seen it in practice. In practice, they've done a lot more. I worked with Gesele, in fact, and Gesele would, of course, do her job. And she would say, well, in my community, this is happening. What can we do there? So we see that the youth do much more, but it's also important to create the conditions for them to be included. So with that in mind, I would like to thank the youth for their participation and for that inspirational strength that they provide. I would also like to thank all of the panelists who joined us today at this webinar, where we wanted to maybe start the conversation as part of the initial pilot. But again, we'll continue to work along these lines. The pilot convinced us now that we have to continue to work under this program for youth leadership. So you have our social networks now already posted for you to follow us and learn about new opportunities as they come up. So thank you very much.
Muy bien, muchas gracias,
Very well. Thank you, Mercedes, and thanks to our panelists who joined us today as well for their very relevant thoughts that we are taking away. And also special thanks to everyone who joined us at this webinar. Thank you so much for your presence, for your questions, because you are truly the reason why we have these spaces. Lastly, I wouldn't like to go without thanking the communications team at HLA for their orientation, and thanks to them, in fact, we were able to provide the interpretation service today. In the coming days, we will be providing you with a recording of this session, and hopefully you all have a great rest of the day. We'll see you soon.